Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Gaurav Sharma and with me is Abhineet Shukla bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. A look at the headlines first. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls on West to give immediate security guarantees to defuse crisis build-up near Ukraine's borders. SCO Secretary General Vladimir Norov says India's role is essential in maintaining peace and stability in Central Asian region. India and European Investment Bank ink deal for first tranche loan of 250 million euros for Agra Metro Rail project. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi reviews COVID-19 related situation amid the rising cases of COVID variant Omicron. Beijing Winter Olympics organizers urge participants to get vaccinated for COVID-19. India's National Dope Testing Laboratory regains World Anti-Doping Agency accreditation. And in cricket, India beat UAE by 154 runs in the first match of 50 overs Asian Cricket Council Under-19 cricket tournament at Dubai. As India marches towards administering 150 crore vaccine doses against COVID-19, news about the new corona variant is a cause for concern. In this situation, we appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and help others get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now, the news in detail. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called on the West to give immediate security guarantees to defuse a crisis prompted by Russia's military build-up near Ukraine's borders. He demanded that NATO abandon military activity in Eastern Europe and not admit Ukraine as a member. Speaking during a marathon annual news conference, the Russian leader welcomed talks with the US that are set to start in Geneva next month. He also warned that Moscow expects the discussion to produce quick results. Last week, Moscow submitted the draft security documents demanding that the NATO deny membership to Ukraine and other former Soviet countries. It also demanded rolling back the NATO's military deployments in Central and Eastern Europe. US President Joe Biden warned Putin in a conference call earlier this month that Russia will face severe consequences if it attacks Ukraine. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions, the media outlets were not able to apply for accreditation to the event for the first time since it was held in 2001. Instead, the Kremlin handpicked around 500 international and domestic journalists to participate. India's role is essential in maintaining peace and stability in the Central Asian region, which translates into a peaceful SCO region. The Secretary General of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, Vladimir Norov, said this at his farewell meet in Beijing. He specially mentioned Indian role in countering terrorism in the region, most importantly due to the evolving situation in Afghanistan. He said that India has an important contribution in maintaining peace and stability in Afghanistan and in humanitarian support to the war-torn country post-US withdrawal. Highlighting India's constructive role in the SCO, Mr. Norov said that India actively participates in the organizational activities, including the regional anti-terrorist structure of the SCO. He said that India participates in military exercises and peace missions to strengthen the security cooperation. India assumed chairmanship of the Council of Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure of the SCO in October this year for 1 year. The year 2022 will be an important year for India at the SCO, as for the first time it will assume the presidency of the organization.
Indian government and the European Investment Bank on Wednesday signed a finance contract for the first tranche loan of 250 million euros for the Agra Metro Rail project. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had inaugurated construction work of the metro project in Agra last year through video conference. European Investment Bank had approved a total loan of 450 million euros to fund the Agra metro rail project. The project aims to provide safe, reliable, affordable and environment-friendly public mass rapid transit system for Agra city. It will improve mobility and support endeavour for planned urban development in Agra. Indian government and the German Development Bank on Thursday signed agreements for 150 million euros reduced interest loan and 2 million euro grant for energy reform program in Madhya Pradesh. Rajat Kumar Mishra, Additional Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs in the Finance Ministry, signed the agreements on behalf of the government. Dr. Jürgen Welskopf, Head of Division Energy South Asia, signed for German Development Bank. The project comprises of two components. These are implementation of smart meters and advanced metering infrastructure or AMI and separation of agriculture and non-agriculture feeders. The project will contribute to a more stable, secure and climate and environmentally friendly energy supply in India by upgrading and strengthening distribution networks in Madhya Pradesh.
India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and Australian Trade Minister Dan Tehan held talks recently to expedite the bilateral Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement negotiations. Both the ministers appreciated the progress made in various rounds of talks between the chief negotiators of both the sides. They discussed the way forward for an early conclusion of the interim agreement. The Commerce Ministry has said that the ministers look forward to a balanced trade agreement that benefits both the economies and their people and that reflects their shared commitment to a rules-based international trading system. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level meeting on Thursday to review the status of COVID and the Omicron variant. He took stock of public health response measures for containment and management of COVID, strengthening of health infrastructure including availability of drugs, oxygen cylinders and concentrators, ventilators and status of vaccination. The Prime Minister has directed the officials to maintain high level of vigil and alertness at all levels. He directed the centre to work in close coordination with the states to support their efforts of public health measures of containment and management under the whole of government approach. He said that the strategy of the Centre for proactive, focused, collaborative and cooperative fight against the pandemic should guide all future actions. The Prime Minister also said the fight against the pandemic is not over and the need for continued adherence to COVID-safe behaviour is of paramount importance even today. Mr. Modi directed the officials to ensure that the health systems in the states, beginning from the district level, are strengthened to meet any challenge posed by the new variant. He stressed the importance for states to ensure that the oxygen supply equipments are installed and fully functional. He asked the officials to work with the states on a regular basis and review the status of preparedness of various components of health infrastructure. He also directed officials for effective use of IT tools for telemedicine and teleconsultation. Mr. Modi was apprised of the progress in vaccination across the country. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
The Indian government has advised states and union territories to not let their guard down and maintain their preparedness for fighting COVID in view of the new Omicron variant. Union Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan reviewed public health preparedness of the states for fighting COVID along with progress of vaccination with state health secretaries and National Health Mission MDs through video conference today. Mr. Bhushan re-emphasized the five-fold strategy of containment, testing and surveillance, clinical management, COVID-safe behavior and vaccination. The states were asked to keep a close and strict watch on number of Delta and Omicron cases in all districts, case positivity, doubling rate and new emerging clusters and initiate containment in these areas. They were advised to impose night curfews and ensure strict regulation of large gatherings, especially ahead of the forthcoming festivities. India's Health and Family Welfare Ministry on Thursday said over 140 crore 24 lakh doses of COVID vaccines have been administered in the country under the nationwide vaccination drive. The ministry said more than 70 lakh 17,000 COVID vaccine doses were administered in the last 24 hours. 6,960 COVID patients have recovered during the last 24 hours, taking the national recovery rate to 98.40%. The country reported 7,495 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the government has said a total of 236 cases of COVID variant Omicron have been reported so far in the country. Out of these, 104 patients have already recovered. Overall, Omicron cases have been reported in 16 states and union territories.
China is facing yet another COVID-19 outbreak, forcing the government to put a lockdown in the northwest Chinese city of Xi'an. The state media reported the lockdown in Xi'an is one of the largest lockdowns in the country this year, as the city has imposed tight curbs on outbound travel as well as ordinary commuting within the city. As the New Year celebrations are approaching, amid the scare of the Omicron variant and Beijing Winter Olympics not far, this new serious outbreak has forced the authorities to put all residential communities under close management in the city of 13 million people. Beijing Winter Olympics organizers on Thursday urged participants to get vaccinated for COVID-19 due to the concerns about the spread of the Omicron variant. Han Zerong, Vice President and Secretary General of the Beijing Winter Olympics Organizing Committee, said at a press conference in Beijing that they expect a certain number of COVID-19 cases in China due to foreigners arriving for the Games. It will be held from February the 4th to the 20th. The Games will take place with all athletes and related personnel and staff in a closed loop in order to contain the spread of the virus. China, which has all but shut its borders during the pandemic and will not allow overseas spectators at the Games, has reported 4 Omicron infections from people coming from overseas. The fast spread of Omicron in North America led the National Hockey League to announce yesterday that its players will not participate in Beijing, depriving the Games of the star power of the sport's biggest names.
In South Korea, the Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Thursday said that more than 100 people died due to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. It has raised the country's total number of pandemic fatalities to over 5,000. Officials have warned that the highly transmissible Omicron variant could soon become the dominant strain. In recent weeks, South Korea has been grappling with soaring infections and deaths after it significantly relaxed restrictions in early November as part of its effort to return to pre-pandemic normalcy. Head of the Africa Centers for Disease Control, CDC, John Anakang Song, has said that South Korea Omicron data should not be extrapolated to all countries across the world. In an online media briefing, he said that Omicron coronavirus variant was found 70 to 80% less severe than Delta in South Africa. But it may not be applicable to all countries and the data should be interpreted with a lot of caution, he added.
U.S. President Joe Biden has denied his administration bungled its response to the emergence of the Omicron variant. He told a television network that nobody could have predicted it. His top advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, has said experts did foresee variants. It comes with the White House unveiled plans to order 500 million at-home coronavirus tests amid a shortage. There are long waits for in-person tests as Christmas looms. The World Health Organization has said that it does not yet have enough data on the new Omicron variant of the coronavirus to say if it is more severe than the Delta variant. WHO's technical lead on COVID-19 said they do have some data suggesting that rates of hospitalization are lower, but she cautioned against drawing conclusions from the early data.
World Health Organization chief has warned that blanket booster programs of COVID-19 vaccines are likely to prolong the pandemic rather than ending it by diverting supply to countries that already have high levels of vaccination coverage. Addressing a media briefing at Geneva, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus added that it will give the virus more opportunity to spread and mutate. He said no country can boost its way out of the pandemic and boosters cannot be seen as a ticket to go ahead with planned celebrations without the need for other precautions. The WHO chief said about 20% of all vaccine doses administered every day are currently being given as boosters or additional doses. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a special program on the year that was in the Indo-Pacific.
The year 2021 has seen tremendous flux in the Indo-Pacific region. Both traditional security issues and the continued impact of non-traditional security challenges are critical to understand. The ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic critically challenged the states of this region throughout this year, bringing to the forefront the challenging role of non-traditional security threats. On the optimistic side, the early vaccination rollout that began in January 2021 was heralded as a critical inflection point in the fight against the pandemic. As the process of the vaccine rollout began on the domestic front, countries went through devastating second and third waves of the pandemic. For India, this was a difficult period as the Delta variant was the cause of a severe spread of the pandemic. The wider issues in the Indo-Pacific are clearly seeing a definitive and more concerted approach. This year saw deepening of the ties among the quadrilateral members, India, Japan, Australia and the US, who have begun the process of institutionalizing the Quad. One of the clear indicators of this is that the new US administration of President Joe Biden that took office in January 2021 continued to show a bipartisan approach to the developments in the Indo-Pacific. The focus on China's rise and its challenge to the normative order was clearly a matter of convergence within the US political divide. President Biden's efforts to formalize the Quad saw a clear response from other Quad members too, given the difficult nature of the bilateral ties that these countries have had with China's aggressive policies. However, the strength of the Quad has been on addressing vaccine rollout, where the Quad pledged a number of free vaccines to several of the smaller states in the Indo-Pacific. More recently, the Quad has also looked at convergence on outer space, which is another emerging global common. India's devastating second wave hampered the vaccine rollout as the focus was to vaccinate the domestic population. One of the major challenges for India was the vaccine drive, and this was very well handled. The region also saw the geopolitical challenges of the American pullout from Afghanistan and the return of the Taliban, bringing the Central and West Asian region sharply into focus. Increasingly for both India and other countries such as France, the Western Indian Ocean will be important. France carried out its La Perouse naval exercise with the Quad countries in April 2021, redefining its interests in the Indo-Pacific region. Several European countries began the process of identifying the priorities to the Indo-Pacific this year on addressing challenges to the normative order and adhering to the tenets of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. In September 2021, the formation of the AUKUS, Australia, UK and US alliance clearly highlighted the strategic shift to the region. For the ASEAN, the challenge of 2021 has revolved around the political situation within Myanmar. The February 2021 coup d'etat has been significant for ASEAN as it has tried to boost efforts towards political reconciliation among the conflicting parties. But this has met with little success, especially as ASEAN itself is not cohesive on any vital matters. Recently, there have been some stresses on ASEAN ties, even as Cambodia, the next chair of ASEAN, has indicated that the ASEAN decision of keeping Myanmar out for the time being may not be conducive to a resolution. Prime Minister Hun Sen has been toying with the idea of a visit to Myanmar to address the political stresses, even as Cambodia has been placed under US embargo on matters relating to human rights and corruption in December 2021. The increasing domestic challenges for ASEAN countries are likely to keep the grouping more engaged, even as the tensions in the South China Sea have constantly seen a more assertive posture from China. The Indo-Pacific will remain a mega region of fast changes as the geopolitical shifts evolve further.
Now we have Professor Shankari Sundararaman of the Center for Pacific Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. She takes a look at the region from the Indian perspective.
This year has been a year of flux as far as the Indo-Pacific region is concerned, primarily because the continued impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been very clearly evident throughout the region during this year. And I think what this has done is brought to the forefront the challenging role that non-traditional security continues to play globally. Apart from this, I think we've also seen that traditional security issues have challenged the region, particularly because of China's assertive, aggressive posture vis-a-vis several states in the region, where tensions in the South China Sea have continued relentlessly. The border clashes with India are very critical as far as India is concerned. And I think what we've seen overall is that there is a continued effort to define this Indo-Pacific region as it is continuously evolving and, changing. And there's a concerted approach also by multiple states to sort of define their own approach to the Indo-Pacific. And I think what you see this year critically is that we've seen the deepening of the ties among the Quad members who have begun the process of sort of institutionalizing the Quad as a mechanism. And I would say that this is a mechanism at the mega regional level. And you also see that much of the focus has been on ensuring that the Quad strengthens its cooperation, particularly on non-traditional security areas also, because the Quad has clearly indicated addressing the vaccine rollout, pledging a number of free vaccines to several smaller states in the Indo-Pacific. And more recently, the Quad, I think in October this year, has also looked at convergence on other global commons, particularly outer space. So now both the maritime areas, the sea lanes of communication, as well as outer space, these are all emerging as critical areas where countries will show convergence, particularly on maintaining the normative order. For India particularly, I would say that the second wave was a very devastating experience. And one of the major challenges for India, as far as the vaccine drive was concerned, was to sort of address the domestic demand. And I think we have done it very well because today more than 40%, if I look at the literature on the world data, it shows about 41%, but I think the Ministry of Family and Health and Welfare gives you a data, I think almost approximately about 50%. So I think on the vaccination drive, it was a mammoth task which India has coordinated very well and achieved by the government. And I think this has been one of the most remarkable, programs that India has carried out. So there's a huge advantage that India has shown on this aspect. And increasingly, I think we're also finding that the region itself is evolving geopolitically, because if you take the Indo-Pacific as the strategic unit that, a singular strategic unit that covers the Indian and the, Pacific Ocean, you see the geopolitical tensions that have happened in Afghanistan have again brought to the forefront Central and West Asia region sharply into focus. And I think this is going to be an area of evolving concern, especially for countries like, say, France and India, because the Western Indian Ocean will be important. Similarly, you see that in the Eastern Indian Ocean, if you take the events that have taken place in Myanmar and the political coup there, you also see that ASEAN is now focusing increasingly on the areas of Myanmar and the South China Sea. So all in all, both in terms of the continuation of the pandemic as well as traditional security issues and political challenges, we see that the Indo-Pacific has seen a great deal of flux over the last 1 year. And this is something that is likely to continue because there are fast changes that are happening in the region. And India will continue to maintain its focus on this area because this is an area of primary concern for India. And I think that while India has continued to focus on its strategic autonomy, it will expand and its ties with trusted friends and neighbors, and as well as engage with multiple countries on which it finds convergence.
The Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla called on Myanmar's chairperson of the State Administrative Council SAC, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, and other senior representatives. He also held meetings with the members of the civil society and political parties, including the National League for Democracy, NLD, on his second and concluding day of his working visit to Myanmar. The Foreign Secretary also exchanged views with select ambassadors in Myanmar on issues of mutual interest. During his meetings, the Foreign Secretary emphasized India's interest in seeing Myanmar's return to democracy at the earliest, release of detainees and prisoners, resolution of issues through dialogue and complete cessation of all violence, said an official press release of the Ministry of External Affairs on Thursday. Expressing its support to the ASEAN initiative, India hoped that progress would be made based on the 5-point consensus. A famous statue at the University of Hong Kong marking the Tiananmen Square massacre has been removed. The statue showed piled-up corpses to commemorate pro-democracy protesters killed by the Chinese authorities in 1989. It was one of the few remaining public memorials in Hong Kong commemorating the incident. The university had initially ordered in October the removal of the statue called the Pillar of Shame. The Indian Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Thakur on Thursday said the National Dope Testing Laboratory has regained the World Anti-Doping Agency WADA accreditation. In a series of tweets, Mr. Thakur said the restoration of accreditation is a boost to India's efforts to achieve the highest global standards of excellence in sport. He termed it as a result of the untiring efforts by the government. The minister said last week in the parliament that the government introduced the National Anti-Doping Bill 2021, which is another step in India's quest to become a sporting powerhouse.
In cricket, India beat UAE by 154 runs in the first match of 50 overs Asian Cricket Council Under-19 cricket tournament at Dubai today. Put into bat first, India scored 282 for 5 in 50 overs. In reply, UAE were bowled out for 128 in 34.3 overs. This is the second time after 2013-14 that UAE is hosting this 50-over tournament, which has 8 teams including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Nepal and United Arab Emirates taking part. In a scintillating match, Korea defeated Japan to lift the trophy in the Hero Asian Champions Trophy hockey in Dhaka on Wednesday. The Five-Nation tournament came to an end with 2 matches being played on the last day of the game. India defeated Pakistan 4-3 to secure the bronze medal, while Korea defeated Japan 4-2 to emerge Asian champions. Speaking exclusively to Prasar Bharati, captain of the Indian team Manpreet Singh praised players of both the teams for their excellent game during the match. He expressed determination to do better for the forthcoming international tournaments for the Indian hockey team. And now a report from the business world.
The BSE Sensex rose 385 points to trade at 57,315. The NSE Nifty also surged 117 points up to trade at 17,073. Asian shares indices logged modest gains. European markets were also up in the intraday trade. Oil prices witnessed modest gains. In the intraday trade, Brent crude was trading around $75.50 per barrel. Back home, gold prices fell marginally by 20 rupees at the multi-commodity exchange for February contracts. And in the forex market, the rupee also appreciated 31 paise against the US dollar. The domestic unit closed at 75 rupees and 24 paise against the US currency. Nishit Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
And now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Sputnik News writes, NATO expansion to the east is unacceptable for Russia, Putin says. Tolo News reports, UN adopts resolution clearing way for aid to Afghanistan. Financial Times says, International Monetary Fund says, Argentina bailout program was too fragile to succeed. The Wall Street Journal writes, Europe moves ahead on minimum corporate tax as US stalls. The Japan Times says, Japan and US draft operation plan for Taiwan contingency. Washington Post writes, driven by Omicron, US cases surpass summer Delta peak. And South China Morning Post reports Chinese terracotta warriors city Xi'an in lockdown as COVID-19 outbreak grows. Before we end, a quick look at the headlines once again. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls on West to give immediate security guarantees to defuse crisis build-up near Ukraine's borders. SCO Secretary General Vladimir Norov says India's role is essential in maintaining peace and stability in Central Asian region. India and European Investment Bank ink deal for first tranche loan of 250 million euros for Agra Metro Rail project. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi reviews COVID-19 related situation amid the rising cases of COVID variant Omicron. Beijing Winter Olympics organizers urge participants to get vaccinated for COVID-19. India's National Dope Testing Laboratory regains World Anti-Doping Agency accreditation. And in cricket, India beat the UAE by 154 runs in the first match of 50 overs Asian Cricket Council Under-19 cricket tournament at Dubai.
India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Croatia.
that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.